So tonight, I just thank Creator for all of you being present with us, for your listening ears, for your eyes that are seeing what is going on, for your mouth that you are able to speak and to speak words of kindness and honesty and truth with courage and compassion. And I also am thankful for your heart, probably more than anything else, because it takes a good heart to look at what is going on around us, to hear what is going on beyond the words that are spoken, to listen from your heart and to try to understand and to learn.
It means to do a land acknowledgement without having concrete action. So as we are acknowledging our land, it just invites to think about how is this acknowledgement stepping beyond that? How are we, by knowing, what are we able to do?
One of the problems I think that exists in today's world is the separation of the true knowledge that made Canada what it is today. But what's not taught in the schools and how things are hidden from our past, we need to bring that to the forefront sometimes, just so that we can get that grounding of that understanding, but not to stay there, but to look forward to a time when reconciliation can be achieved in this country from all members of this great nations that live on this beautiful land. And that's why we need to remember that those treaties are still valid today. The sun is still shining, the grass is still growing, and the rivers are still flowing. And that's really what we need to have people talk to your young people about today, those young people in school, those members in churches, the ones who are wanting to know the real truth about how we can coexist. Our battle with Line 9, with the pipelines running through our territory without our consent, has deep-rooted meaning that we will fight for the rights of our people, and it's our treaty rights to be able to protect the lands that we call our home and our ancestral territory. I think this gets neglected sometimes in those media outlets that talk about the confrontation more than the history and the reason why it came to that point.
It's not like that there's not people willing to try to work. The problem has been for many years is that no one's coming to the table to deal with these claims. And yet development continues to encroach onto those claims that have already been submitted and are unresolved. That's what you see in Caledonia. That's what you see in Oka. So what you saw in Ipperwash. This wasn't something that just happened. It's been something that's been happening for hundreds of years. And as I showed you in the slide, there's also a huge issue around the trust monies that Canada and its Indian agents were taking from our trust fund account while our people were starving at that time. So what I want you at the end of the day to take note of is how do we impact change? Ask your governments to sit down at the table. Ask them to consult and accommodate. Ask them to understand and educate themselves about what it is about treaty rights, but also what it is to work with the First Nation and that treaty land. That go to your MPP, go to your MP, ask them questions, say, listen, why isn't this being dealt with? And a lot of times people do get very frustrated, and what you see at the front lines is not government officials trying to negotiate. You see the OPP, the police services, the Quebec police in Oka. You see them having to take up the front lines for the government because they're not willing to deal with the issue at hand. And I think a lot of this could be prevented if, the government would come to the table and start to resolve these outstanding and unresolved land claims.
I've always been told by the elder that if you want to fix something, you have to go back to the beginning and start from there.
When Sam and I were talking about this evening, we were discussing the fact that it all began, like Sam was just saying, in the beginning with the land. I just wanted everyone to know what we're talking about tonight when we talk about Treaty 9. So, if you look at the light green shaded area on your map, That is Treaty 9. It's 2/3 of the province. And
You know, when you look at this picture, there's hundreds of stories in just a little picture. Important. As part of what you see, if you look at the map of Ontario or any map of Canada, there's all those English names on there. But long before that, there was always those Anishinaabe names, our names on them. And part of their trying to erase our history is changing the names of those rivers and putting different names on there that we have no connection to where they had to stay. And the fourth thing that happened was the Indian residential schools. What the Indian residential schools did was to take the children from the communities and take the children from their families and take them far away and forbid them to speak their language, forget their culture, where they came from. So when we won little battles here and there, we're still here, but it's always been a struggle just to maintain our way of life and our way of doing things, and I don't think that we will ever stop.
And one of my roles, I had decided to be not a witness in the legal sense, but to bear witness to what was happening in the courtroom. To my delight, one of the other regular visitors there was a mom from Zurich who would show up in time for break with a big Tupperware full of egg salad sandwiches for all the guys from Stony Point. Now, I'm not going to identify her, though I do remember her name. I don't know exactly how much insight she had into the long and complicated history, but it was a simple act of compassion, of hospitality, and I would say solidarity.
Thanks so much, Rick. I love that egg salad solidarity.
I can remember Winnipeg used to have this beautiful little spot called Nietzsche Commons. It was an Indigenous-led gathering space, restaurant, bookstore, and all this. It was during I Don't Know More, 2012-13. There was a gathering there, and I rode my bicycle up to the north end, parked it, and I remember getting off my bike and just kind of shaking, actually. I'm saying, why am I so nervous? Like, I didn't fully understand it. But just to say, I was someone who is already doing this work. Like, I'm on the payroll. I'm supposed to know how reconciliation works and all that. And I was nervous going in as a white Christian into a predominantly Indigenous space, as that space should be. But just wanting to do it in the right way, not to impose myself and all that. So just to say, if you feel nervous, if you feel anxious at times or have fears, you're not alone. You're in good company. And that's part of the process.
In 2007 was when I started my work with the Mennonite Central Committee, Ontario. When I started my work, I sat down with Rick Hill, who is a traditional knowledge keeper, Haudenosaunee knowledge keeper. He said, wouldn't it be great if we could have a spiritual covenant with the churches where they would acknowledge Six Nations jurisdiction over their land, their property? They could have a renewable 99-year lease and pay a token lease payment and be totally free to do their spiritual work. And then if they decommissioned their church, the land could revert to Six Nations again. So I began to share that in Mennonite churches. Flash forward all the way to 2020. So 14 years after Caledonia 2006, a new development on the Plank Road lands was started called Mackenzie Meadows. Six Nations members, led by a new generation of youth, stopped construction, just like Janie Jameson and Don Smith did. The exact same lands, the same actions, the same court injunction, the same police raid, the same continued harassment has happened 14 years later. And they dubbed this new development, it was called Mackenzie Meadows, They redubbed it 1492 Land Back Lane.
The only days that there's ever been any violence here has been the days that the OPP show up with their guns. You know, and I think we've extended that hand to both the province and the federal government to come here, to come to the table with our community, to have that peaceful dialogue so that we can end this in a way that doesn't have to, that dialogue can't happen when the only representation that we see from the feds or the province is a guy with a gun on his hip. You know, like, this is not what peaceful dialogue looks like, and covering everything in concrete and asphalt in the name of progress. Well, this isn't what progress looks like for our community. You know, like, we need to be able to give space for, for the animals, for Mother Earth to be able to grow and thrive. And so we maintain this as a peaceful occupation. We've not said that, people up and down the Grand River need to get out of their houses and remove themselves from the Grand River. But what we are saying is, certainly when it comes to the doorstep of our community, that any vacant lands need to be able to have a process for that to be returned to the reserve.
I think that community to community relationship is a really important thing, because I've been Skylar's friend for over a decade now, and thinking about the repression being put on him, like, he's like a brother to me. He's someone that I love. And so for me, it's not an option to go back to normal. And so I think that if we begin to forge those relationships between the community of Six Nations and the communities of Mennonites in Kitchener-Waterloo and other places on the Haldeman Tract, that people will, like, your heart gets pulled into it and you just don't have a choice.
Now, one of the biggest challenges with these kind of speeches is remembering what's being said, and you can't use the tools if you don't remember what they are. So I made it super easy for you. All you got to do is remember the word path, like the way out. And it's an acronym for the 4 tools. Patience. This is not going to be resolved by next Tuesday. So do what you can today, keep going. Awareness of what's going on for your neighbor in your community, and especially for people who don't look like you. Tenacity is just a really fancy way of saying don't give up. Maybe you have to give up for today. Maybe you're frustrated today. Maybe you need to take a break, but please come back, because there's so much work to do. And last but not least, humility. Remain the eternal student. I learn something new every single day, even though I've been doing this work for decades. So there you have it. Patience, awareness, tenacity, and humility. The 4 sacred tools.
The water walk is not just a walk. It's a ceremony. It's an Anishinaabe ceremony. When I first started visioning it, I started seeing it as an all nations Grand River water walk, not just for our people, Indigenous peoples. It was for everyone to come. When I first started talking with my Mennonite allied friend, it was our allied settlers from the region who were excited, and they all started coming together. And my friend said, it's like the tributaries. Everyone started joining, and it was beautiful.
Could you speak more to the relationship between Indigenous settler reconciliation and reconciliation with the earth?
I think that's important, is building relationships with Indigenous communities, helping us instead of seeing us as inconvenient when we have our protests, when we're standing up for the earth, when we're standing up for the pipelines, when we're standing up for the water. It's to join us. It's to stand with us. And that's what I found with the water walk. There are allied advocates who want to come, who want to help. And it starts with the young, helping the young to learn, because they're the next generations. And that's what we have to think about, is the future generations, not just me, not just now. It's to think about everything else.